Letter sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. I knew what it was. The return address said Estate of Raymond Calloway, and my stomach dropped the second I saw it, because Raymond Calloway was my grandfather, and my grandfather had died 6 weeks earlier, and my family had not told me. I found out through Facebook. A cousin posted a photo from the funeral, flower arrangements, a folded flag, my mother in a black dress I didn't recognize. And I sat in my apartment in Columbus staring at my phone screen, trying to understand how a man who used to sneak me peppermints during church could be in the ground and nobody thought to call me. I was 26. I had not spoken to my parents in 2 years, but I had spoken to my grandfather. Every Sunday, pretty much without fail. He would call from the landline he refused to give up, ask me how my job was going, whether I was eating enough, whether Columbus winters were as bad as people said. He never asked about the fight. He never took sides. He just called. And then one Sunday he didn't. And I told myself he was tired. Or traveling to my aunt's place in Savannah like he sometimes did in October. And then another Sunday passed, and another, and I sent a card to his house on his birthday in November with a drawing of a cardinal, because he loved cardinals, and I never heard back. I thought maybe I had done something wrong. I went over every conversation we'd had looking for the thing I must have said. It wasn't anything I said. He had a stroke in late September. He was gone by the first week of October. My family knew I called him every Sunday and not one of them picked up the phone. I opened the letter on a Wednesday night after work. I was still in my coat. The letter was from his attorney, a man named Gerald Hutchins, and it said that Raymond Calloway had updated his will in August of the previous year, and that I was named as the sole beneficiary of his estate, which included the house in Clover Hill, a savings account, and several investment accounts totaling, after taxes and legal fees, just over $400,000. I read it twice. Then I put it down and stood in my kitchen and didn't move for a long time. My parents got married young, which I think explains some things without excusing any of them. My mother was 22 and my father was 25, and they had me a year later, which was not, as I later understood, entirely planned. They loved me. I want to say that clearly, because it's true and because the rest of this story might make it hard to believe. They loved me in the way that people love things they are not entirely sure what to do with. They signed me up for piano lessons and then got frustrated when I didn't practice. They came to school plays and then critiqued my performance in the car on the way home. They worked hard and expected the same, and when I didn't do things their way, there was always this low hum of disappointment in the house. This sense that I was one deviation away from a conversation nobody wanted to have. My sister was different. Simone was 3 years younger, and she had always known exactly who she was. The kind of person who walked into rooms like she'd been there before, who charmed teachers and coaches and my parents' friends without even trying. I was not jealous of Simone. I loved Simone, but I understood, in the quiet way that children understand things before they have words for it, that she was the daughter my parents had been expecting, and I was the one they got instead. When I was 22, I graduated from Ohio State with a degree in accounting, which should have been the boring, responsible thing my parents wanted, except that I had also, during my senior year, started dating a man they did not like. His name was Marcus. I know, he's not in this story for long, but he matters. And my parents didn't dislike him for any reason they ever said out loud. They just got quiet when I mentioned him. My mother asked, once, whether I thought we were really compatible, the two of us, long term. I asked her what she meant. She said she just wanted me to be sure. I said I was sure. She said okay and smiled and changed the subject, and that was the last time we talked about it directly. Marcus and I broke up 8 months later for reasons that had nothing to do with my family. He got a job offer in Seattle and I wasn't ready to move, and we were honest with each other about that, and it ended okay. I tell you this because I want you to understand that the fight was not about Marcus. The fight was about the promotion. I had been working at the same mid-sized accounting firm for 2 years when a senior position opened up, and I applied and got it. It meant relocating to their Columbus office, which was a 4-hour drive from my parents' house in Cincinnati. My mother cried when I told her, not sad crying, sharp crying, the kind that comes with an edge. She said I was always running away. My father said he thought I was being selfish, that family meant making sacrifices, That my grandfather was getting older and didn't I feel any responsibility toward that? I said I called Grandpa every Sunday and I would keep calling him and that a 4-hour drive was not the end of the world. My father said it wasn't about the distance. My mother said I never thought about anyone but myself. I asked my mother what that meant. She said it meant what it meant. My father said some things after that which I will not repeat because I have spent 2 years trying to let them go and I don't want to pick them back up tonight. What I will say is that by the end of it my mother had said in front of my aunt who was visiting and my sister who had come home for the weekend, that she sometimes thought she'd been a better mother to me than I deserved. That she had given me everything and I gave back nothing, that she didn't know where I had gotten this coldness, but it wasn't from her side of the family. My aunt said her name softly. My sister looked at her hands. I picked up my purse and my keys and I left. I drove to a motel 20 minutes away and I sat in the parking lot for a while before I went inside. I had $340 in my checking account and my next paycheck was in 6 days. The room was $89 a night. I stayed 2 nights, then drove to Columbus and slept on a friend's couch until my new apartment was ready. I did not call my parents after that. I called my grandfather that Sunday like always and he said in his careful way that he had heard things got heated and that he was sorry, and that he loved me. He didn't tell me what my parents had said to him about it. He didn't ask me to apologize, he just said he loved me and asked about Columbus. The Columbus years were quiet in a way that took getting used to. I had the job, which was demanding and absorbing and left me too tired most evenings to sit with the things I wasn't thinking about. I made friends slowly, the way adults do. Through work. Through running group I joined and then actually stuck with. Through a neighbor named Terry who knocked on my door one Saturday with a plate of cookies because she had made too many and did I want some. I said yes. We had coffee that afternoon and I told her almost nothing about my family and she didn't push. And we have been friends for 4 years now. I dated a little. Nothing serious, mostly because I wasn't sure I trusted my own judgment about serious, and because serious felt like it required an explanation of my family situation that I didn't know how to give without making myself sound broken. I was not broken. I was cautious. There's a difference. I moved into a better apartment after my first raise. I started cooking real food instead of eating at my desk. I went to therapy for a while and stopped and started again. I called my grandfather every Sunday and he told me about the birds at his feeder, and the neighbor kid who mowed his lawn, and whether the Cardinals were going to have a decent season this year. He never mentioned my parents and I never asked. I built something. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't fast, and there was no moment where I looked around and felt like I had arrived somewhere. It was just one ordinary decision after another, stacked up. Until one day I looked at my bank account and understood that I was, quietly, and without fanfare, doing okay. The attorney's office was in a brick building in Clover Hill, 30 minutes from Cincinnati, and I drove down on a Thursday afternoon after taking a half day from work. I had called Gerald Hutchins the morning after I opened the letter and he had been professional and kind and not asked any questions about the family situation, which I appreciated. He walked me through everything. My grandfather had updated his will 14 months before his death. The house, the savings, the investments. All to me. There was a note, handwritten, attached to the will, that Gerald said I could take with me if I wanted. I took it. I read it in my car in the parking lot. My grandfather's handwriting was careful and slightly cramped, the way old men write when their hands aren't quite what they used to be. You call every Sunday, he wrote, that matters more than you know. I am proud of the life you made. I want you to have the room to keep making it. Don't be small on my account. I sat with that for a while. My mother called me on a Friday afternoon, about 4 weeks after I met with the attorney. I had not told anyone in my family about the will yet. I didn't know who had told her. She called twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. The voicemail was short. She said she wanted to talk, that she'd heard some things, that she hoped I was doing well. The tone was careful in a way that her tones almost never were. I noticed that. My father called the next morning. I picked up because I was surprised. In 2 years, my father had not called once. He said hello. I said hello. There was a pause that I let sit there. He said he had heard about the will. I said yes. He said he thought we should all sit down together, that there was a lot to discuss. Then he said something that I have turned over many times since. That he hoped I understood that your family was your family no matter what. I asked him what that meant, in terms of what he was actually asking me. He said that the house, my grandfather's house, had been in the family a long time. He said there were things in it that had sentimental value. He said he didn't want this to become a legal thing. I said I didn't want that either. He said good, and his voice relaxed slightly, and then I said, but I'm not selling the house. The pause after that was different from the first one. I told him I intended to keep the house, that I was looking into what it would take to maintain it, that I had been in touch with the attorney and everything was in order. I told him that if there were specific items with sentimental value, I was open to a conversation about those specific items. I told him I would not be talking about the financial accounts. He said he thought I was being vindictive. I said I was being clear, and that those were different things. He said he wanted to meet. I said I would think about it. I did think about it. For about 3 weeks I thought about almost nothing else. I went on my runs and I talked to Terry and I called my therapist, and I sat at my grandfather's house one weekend, alone, walking through the rooms he had moved through for 40 years, touching the windowsills and the door frames in the kitchen table where he used to drink his coffee while the birds came to the feeder outside. I understood, in those rooms, what he had given me. Not just the money. Though the money was real, and I am not going to pretend it wasn't life-changing, he had given me proof that someone had been watching. That someone had seen how I showed up every Sunday in the ordinary way that most people overlook, and had decided that mattered. I thought about what I wanted from a meeting with my parents, whether there was anything to say that hadn't already been said, whether I wanted a relationship with them at all. The answer to the last question surprised me. I did want a relationship. Not the old one. Not the one where I was always the person being weighed and found slightly short, but something honest, maybe. Something where the score wasn't always being kept. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. We met at a restaurant in Cincinnati on a Saturday in March, which was gray and cold the way March in Ohio always is. I got there first and ordered coffee and sat with it. They came in together. My parents and my mother looked older than I remembered, and my father's hair had gone more gray. We hugged in that careful way. People hug when they don't know what they are to each other anymore. We ordered. We made small talk about the weather and the drive and the restaurant, which my mother said she had been to before. I let us have that. It felt necessary, like a buffer zone. Then my father said he wanted to address the elephant in the room, and I said, okay. He said he thought the will had put everyone in a difficult position, and that he hoped we could handle it as a family. My mother nodded. I looked at them both. I said, I'm not here to negotiate the will. I already told you that. I'm here because I want to talk about what happened 2 years ago. My mother said she thought we had been through that. I said we had been through a version of it, the version where they said their piece and I left. I said I wanted to say my piece now. My father leaned back slightly. My mother straightened. I told them what that night had done to me, not dramatically. I had practiced this in my head for a long time, and I had taken out everything that sounded like accusation or performance, and what was left was just the plain truth. I told them I had driven to a motel with $340 and 6 days until payday. I told them I had found out my grandfather died from a Facebook post. I told them that one had hurt more than anything my mother had said in that living room, because it meant that in the moment where they could have called, they chose not to. My mother started to say something about how complicated things had been. I said I understood things had been complicated. I said that didn't answer the question of why nobody called. She looked at her coffee cup. My father looked at the table. There was a long silence. Then my father said, I don't know why we didn't call. I've thought about it. I don't have a good answer. I don't know what I expected him to say. Not that. Something defensive, probably. Something about how I was the one who left, which was true and which I had my own feelings about. Not that. My mother said she was sorry about the things she said that night. She said she didn't mean the coldness comment. That she had said it because she was hurt, and she knew that wasn't an excuse. She didn't say it the way people say things when they want the conversation to be over. She said it slowly, like it cost her something. I sat with that. I told them I wasn't ready to pretend 2 years hadn't happened. I told them I wasn't going to be making major financial decisions with family input. I told them the house was mine and I was keeping it, and I would be renting it out for now, because I wasn't ready to sell it and I wasn't ready to live in it. I told them that if they wanted a relationship with me going forward, I was open to that, but slowly, on terms we agreed on, not terms that defaulted back to the old way. My father asked what that meant, practically. I said it meant we talked to each other like adults. It meant if someone was upset, they said so directly instead of letting it build until someone said something that couldn't be unsaid. It meant the will was not up for discussion ever, and if that was a condition they couldn't accept, I understood. But then we didn't have much to build on. My mother said that seemed fair. My father said he thought he could do that. I looked at them both. I thought about my grandfather at his kitchen table, watching the Cardinals. I thought about what he wrote. Don't be small on my account. I wasn't going to be small, not anymore. I picked up my coffee, I said, okay, then let's start there. My grandfather's house is in Clover Hill on a street with old oak trees that go orange and red every October. I rented it to a young couple last spring, a physical therapist and a teacher who grow tomatoes in the backyard and leave the porch light on at night, which is the kind of thing my grandfather would have liked. I visit sometimes when I'm in Cincinnati to see my parents, which happens every couple of months now. We are careful with each other in the way that people are careful when they have broken something and are still figuring out if it can hold weight. Some days are better than others. My mother and I went to a farmer's market last fall and didn't talk about anything important, and it was the best 2 hours we'd had in years. Simone called me in December. She said she was sorry she had been quiet during everything. That she hadn't known what to do and had done nothing, which she knew was its own kind of failure. I said I appreciated her saying that. I meant it. I still run. I still go to therapy, on and off. I have a better apartment now, with a window that faces east, and I drink my coffee in the morning looking out at the light coming up over the buildings, and I think about what my grandfather knew, which is that showing up in the ordinary ways is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the whole thing. He knew that before I did. He left me a house and $400,000 and a note that said, "Don't be small." And I am doing my best to earn all three. I keep a cardinal ornament on my windowsill. It's ceramic, a little chipped on the wing, and I bought it at a craft fair 2 years ago because it reminded me of my grandfather and his feeder and his patient way of watching things come and go without trying to hold them. People ask me sometimes whether I regret how things went with my parents, whether I think I was too hard on them or not hard enough. I never have a clean answer. Because the truth is, it wasn't really about being hard or soft. It was about being honest, with them and with myself, when everything in me wanted to just smooth it over and pretend we were fine. That kind of honesty takes something out of you. I think people underestimate that. It's easy to look at someone who holds a boundary and call it coldness. It's harder to understand that some of us had to practice that honesty for years in the privacy of our own heads before we could say it out loud in a restaurant in Cincinnati with our hands around a cup of coffee we weren't really drinking. My grandfather understood something that I've been slowly learning. That showing up is a moral act. Not in a grand public way, not the kind of thing you post about. Just the ordinary faithfulness of being where you said you'd be, doing what you said you'd do, calling on Sunday even when Sunday feels like just another day you're getting through. He watched me do that for years and he decided it meant something. That landed in me like a stone in still water. The ripples are still going. I made a lot of decisions in my 20s by trying to think clearly instead of just reacting. That was harder than it sounds. After the fight, the easiest thing would have been to write my parents off entirely, and there were days I wanted to, but I kept asking myself whether the thing I was doing came from a clear-eyed place or just a hurt one, and those are not always the same thing. When I finally called my mother, I wasn't ready to forgive everything. I was ready to think. That's different. Thinking meant I could want a relationship and still say no to the terms that had broken the first one. The hardest part of my story isn't the part people think it is. It's not the motel, or finding out about the funeral on Facebook, or sitting in a parking lot reading a handwritten note from a man I would never get to call again. The hardest part was deciding, after all of that, to stay in the room. To keep showing up. To believe that something that had been damaged that badly could still be worth the slow, careful work of rebuilding. I don't know yet if I was right about that. Some days the relationship with my parents feels like genuine progress. Some days it feels like two people being very polite to each other across a distance that hasn't really closed. But I'm still there. And so are they. And maybe that's the thing my grandfather was trying to tell me all along. Don't be small. Keep showing up. Let what you build be worth something. I'm trying.